Hi, here we are with assignment 6. Now, for this assignment, the idea is that you build 3 different designs, and you could even use relatively basic shapes. I went for a few more complex shapes for some of my objects. And once you arrive at these different objects, each having their own color, at least 3 again, you'll cut out multiples of each shape in its own media. So I know we don't have much for paint, but what you could do is black paper for one of the shapes if you've got black paper left. You use magazines or whatever collage material. You could mix up gray paint and make gray paper to cut it out of, whatever you want. I just want each shape to be associated with one color or paper source. So I've got multiples of each shape that I've cut out, and I've tried to be as exact as possible in cutting out the same shape over and over again. Then what you'll do is you will play with how you could build these into a bigger design. So it's the 3 combined together that you're using to make a bigger design. You will glue these together and make many copies of this. Then you'll come over to your sheet, and I want you to take your sheet and grid this out so you can give yourself some instructions on where your pattern will go. So simply gridding, of course, would be to bisect this vertically, then horizontally, and then in between those two, then in between those two, and so on. And I showed you on the slides the beginning and steps through my example. And so I wanted to show you what the end result was for that example. And you can see what I've done then with each of the shapes is I've put down the original, then I've taken the second one and I've flipped that same shape and I've overlapped those two. I did the same thing over here. I flipped it again and I overlapped those two. That way we can create all of this interesting space happening in between. So you can see down on the lower bit here, I've flipped it in the other direction and then continued the pattern on. And even that flip has some overlap with the top layer. The idea here is to try to make a pattern that is more than just decorative. I want you to think of this as making a work of art. Now, I want to show you a few examples of student work, and ones that I think are good and ones that I think are not as great. So here's the first one. And you can see they built a relatively more complex shape. They used white as one of the colors, and it sort of works if you're trying to set up a lot of negative space. But maybe it's not the best choice. And you can see that this is a super basic pattern, right? It's just the one cell and then some space, and that cell is turned, and then some space. And they only used the minimum number of required cells, which was 6. So, I mean, this is low B work. I mean, it's the basic thing. The cutting's not so great. It's just a basic square matrix with one flip. This one gets a lot more interesting, even though there isn't overlapping happening. You see they've got a lot of the complex design that has been cut out, and there's really pretty good cutting on this one. And this makes a lot more interesting design. I mean, my complaint would be, though, that still there's not any kind of overlapping that would happen that would create more interesting negative space shapes out of the white. So this is much better. This is more in the higher B range, a lot of it because of the precision and then the overall visual effect I like. When we start to get more complex and do more of the overlapping and shifting and spinning and flipping, we start to get a lot more interesting patterns. So you can see they've got kind of everything going on here. Really nice sharp cutting, the flipping and twisting, overlapping of the two shapes, and then even overlapping of the bottom row with the top row. Here's another. And you can see these are much more engaging than the first few I showed you that are the simple square matrix. So these are more like works of art than just wallpaper. And that's what I'm really after. I want you guys to make these works of art that are design, but they're also more interesting. Look at the intricacy of all of the cutting that's happening here.